Hi, I'm Rod Bryant. Welcome to today's class. This is the third installment of as many as 60 lessons going to be in this Torah mitzvot, Noahide mitzvot and lifestyle course. I really appreciate you guys joining us each day. Thank you for participating in the class. I want to encourage you to continue to ask questions. It is important that you get further distinction. Obviously, these classes are not designed to be exhaustive in any manner or form, because there are just a lot of questions to be asked. And you're going to find as we go along, you might even have more questions, especially after today's topic. Today's topic is called Gentile Identities in the Torah. Just when I say that itself, you've got to understand very specifically, it's not a monolithic idea. This idea of what is a goy, a dear friend and beloved teacher and rabbi of mine, Rabbi Avraham ben Yaakov, wrote a book just a short while ago called Who is That Goy? And in the book, Who is That Goy?, he attempts to explain the complexity of the idea. It's not just simple, a goy is a goy is a goy, or a Gentile is a Gentile is a Gentile. And, well, I would even put as much as saying even the Jewish people have distinction within themselves. There's the Kohanim, there is the Israel themselves, and the tribal identity that later on can be extracted. Now, the exact meaning and identity, as we know, is going to be a lesson that's going to have to be further explored besides in this class. There are non-Jewish identities found throughout the Torah and the Talmud. Non-Jews in the Torah have many identities, and words may have different meanings when they're used, whether in a technical or colloquial context. Let me give you a couple examples for you to understand. Accurate and precise, two very important English words. Often we use them to mean both the same thing. Everyday speech, we would say accurate or precise, meaning almost the same thing. However, they have a different meaning in a scientific context. Similarly, most people hear the word challah. Of course, we know challah is that delicious bread that we eat on Shabbos meals. And you think, braided bread. It's what the Jewish mother makes on Shabbat. However, in the Talmud and other works that determine religious practice, challah, or word, refers to specifically the dough tithe given to the Kohanim priest in the temple times. The Torah issues many terms for non-Jews, and these were a couple of examples, and today we'll attempt to do that. And within the context of Jewish laws, these terms have very specific meaning. However, the use of the terms in Kabbalistic or mystical, midrashic, and other non-legal writings is much less controlled. It takes a trained, experienced rabbi scholar to determine when these terms have a legal and a practical meaning versus a colloquial, metaphoric connotation. Let's first look at the definition of what is an idolater, what is idolatry. Why do I say that this term is real important? It becomes sort of the acid test of what type of goy, what type of non-Jew this person would be. It's quite shocking to hear that a person might be labeled to be punished by death, for example, for the seamlessly harmless act of studying Torah teachings or resting on the Shabbat. We've heard this. We actually mentioned this in a couple of lessons ago. Is the death penalty to be understood literally? Is it conceivable that we would be talking about any other goy? That means every goy falls into that category. Every non-Jew falls in that category. Well, certainly there have been those who have proposed that within the Orthodox Jewish world, to say that no non-Jew should ever study Torah. Well, that is a reckless statement on its face value without a careful examination. To interpret them correctly, we must understand to whom exactly they apply. When we say they, we're talking about these different terms. What are these terms and how do they apply? We will then quickly see that blanket terms like idol worshiper, Gentile, or Goy will no longer be used because they are simply imprecise. Now let's continue on by understanding the Hebrew term used in both of the above Talmudic texts is Oved Kochavim, literally means one who worships stars. This is an abbreviated form of the full expression Oved Kochavim Mazalot, one who worships planets and constellations. Technically, the word Kokhavim should be translated as planets, which in rabbinic thought includes the sun and the moon, while Matzalot are constellations, such as those of the zodiac. These phrases is usually printed in rabbinical text using the acronym Akum. So when you read it in, for example, Rambam's Mishnah Torah, you'll see the word Akum. In Hebrew terms, the Hebrew terms for idolatrous worship used throughout the Talmud and abbreviated in rabbinical lectures are called, in literatures, is called avodah zarah, literally meaning strange alien worship, or avodat elilim, worship of idols, or avodat gilgulim. In the comprehensive Mishnah Torah law code of Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Rambam, Rabbi Moshe Maimonides states and explains in the opening section of the laws of idolatry that originally idolatry involved literal worship of the stars and planets based on elaborate relationships developed in the very early times. Mishnah Torah Halachot Avodah Kokaim, Laws of Idolatry, chapters 1 through 2. These are references if you want to look at them closely. However, in your material, there'll be some other references that you can look at as well. He states that the Torah prohibition of idolatry extends beyond the worship of stars and planets. And the reason why this has to be said, that one could read the text of the Rambam and say, well, he's only talking about people who worship the stars and the constellation and planets. The essence of the commandment against idolatry is, quote, is not to serve any one of all of the created beings. Did you hear that? Literally, idolatry is to not serve any one of all the created beings, not of any angel, sphere, star, planet, object, any four elements of fire, air, water, earth, nor any of all that are created from them. Even if a worshiper knows that Hashem is the supreme creator of the universe, this is according to Mishnah Torah, Chelachot Avodah Chachim, in Laws of Idolatry 2:1. Understood in this way, it is readily understandable why any actual practicing of Oved Kochavim or idolater should be forbidden to study Torah and observe the Shabbat. Let me repeat. It goes to show, and it states implicitly, that idolater, one who practices the worship of other gods, whether it be an object, whether it be an ethereal idea, whether it be an image that they even know that there is a creator of the universe, but worship that creator through another being, that is considered idolatrous. So if someone uses an object to pray to the creator of the universe, which was the sin of the golden calf, essentially, and also the 10 northern tribes, when they worshipped on the altar of a pagan god to present an offering to Hashem, they were disbanded and sent out of the country, out of the nation. They should, obviously, not observe the Shabbat or study Torah, both of which are very opposite of idolatry. That is, the study of Torah and Shabbat is the opposite of idolatry. It's the antithesis of idolatry and Torah. For And the reason why Rambam says this, he says, he will surely pervert both and turn them into service of his gods or gods. Now, this is a very touchy situation, because many of you would say, well, I was a Christian and I studied Torah, and I clearly was an idolater at one point, or considered myself an idolater. Well, according to most Jewish thinkers of the postmodern era, Christians are not the idolaters of the ancient age. However, they still have some level of what we call avodah zarah on them. They still they still have the practice, and they'll receive a place in the world to come. They have not gained full access to the greatest benefit they can have by completely rejecting those ideas. And this, of course, is what's happened in the Messianic Christian world. They have taken on Jewish practices and mixed it in with their religious beliefs, and have come up with a perverted gospel that's not even true to their biblical teaching, and for sure is the opposite of Jewish teaching. Now, we'll discuss this later on in detail, and yet later on in the lessons. Despite this, even the practicing of akum is permitted to bring a burnt offering or sacrifice. Let's put a little twist on this. With that being said, a person who's akum in that state is permitted to bring a burnt offering of sacrifice by the priest in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, according to the Mishnah Torah. But could the Talmud possibly be always including all goyim, all non-Jews throughout the entire world at all times, put them under the term of Oved Kochavim, regardless of their actual beliefs and practices, merely because they are not halakhically recognized as a Jew? Well, practically we know you cannot do that. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances since the Holocaust, I think most religious Jews and rabbis have been so focused on kiruv, outreach to the non-affiliated Jew, that sometimes they would just use this patent answer: non-Jews can't study Torah, or the goy cannot study Torah or practice Shabbat. Well, clearly we've come to some understanding, and the advice given from some of the greatest rabbis of our age have clearly said the opposite. That is, you cannot put all non-Jews in the same bag. Well, as a rabbi, you would ask, well, how am I going to know what is a pious non-Jew and what isn't? Well, there's a very simple acid test. Find out, do they believe that Hashem is the one and only true God? There is no other God besides Hashem. Do they believe that the Torah was given to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people to be priests to the nations? And that as a righteous non-Jew, they have seven mitzvot, 7 laws, which are actually 7 categories, and there are probably 70 other laws from the Torah that can extrapolate a better understanding of their walk with Hashem? Should they be considered, if they identify with that and they reject their previous religious connections, then by all means they should study Torah, and they are pious, righteous non-Jew. Is every goy considered an idolater? Well, I'm happy and pleased to say this. Even though that's been the default, the answer must obviously be a definitive, resounding no, as can be proven from many sources in rabbinical literature. Now, let's begin to look at the different categories of the righteous non-Jew. First, there is a ger tzedek. A ger tzedek is a righteous convert. The word ger has many meanings. As a matter of fact, in the postmodern era, anytime you see ger, it's usually talking about a convert today. But it's, once again, not that monolithic. You can't just say a ger is always a convert. But there are differentiations in that ger. So the first one is a ger tzedek. It is a convert when it's included in this example. It derives and implies soul journey, meaning one who is a non-Jew who now sojourns or lives with the people, a convert. However, it is noun form. In its noun form, it means a stranger or an outsider. When used alone, a ger almost always means convert. And when ger is in any way used together with the word toshav, it means a ger toshav is something entirely different than a convert. And we'll discuss ger toshav at length in this lesson in a few moments. The Talmud devotes extensive analysis to determine correct interpretations of the Torah use of the term ger. For clarity, the Talmud qualifies its own use of ger with the term tzedek, meaning a righteous convert. The term ger tzedek is used in the Talmud and codes of Jewish law, means it's exclusively a full convert to Judaism. Now, here's the first question. I asked this question myself a number of years ago. If a ger tzedek is a full convert to Judaism, then why does the Talmud call him a ger tzedek and not simply a Jew? Isn't it wrong to remind a convert that he wasn't a Jew? Isn't it wrong to remind a convert that he once was a goy? Well, the reason is that the convert is not 100% identical to all born Jews. For example, a female convert may not marry a Cohen, a descendant of Aaron. A convert may also not serve in the position of communal authority, such as a synagogue rabbi, nor sit on a base din, a rabbinical tribunal. For the purposes of discussing laws and making decisions of the law, the Talmud must have some way of distinguishing a convert from a born Jew. Therefore, a ger tzaddik. We should note also that there is no other term in Hebrew for a convert, only ger tzedek. Let's look at the term ben Noach, bat Noach, or b'nai Noach. Ben Noach means a son of Noah, bat Noach, a daughter of Noah, and b'nai Noach means the people of Noah, or the nation of Noah. These terms have been used, and in English, the term used for ben or bat very clearly is talking about these, a sort of generic form of any non-Jew who keeps the 7 mitzvahs for any reason. Motivation, there are different types of b'nai Noach. Let me explain. There's one b'nai Noach that is considered the wise ones of the nation. They're the ones who follow the 7 mitzvahs because they seem practical. They seem to be the right logical thing to do. It makes sense to not commit murder, to not steal, to abuse animals. It just makes good, wise sense. From the wise ones of the nation, such as a ben Noach, receives only a very limited portion in the world to come for his observance. He receives most of his merit in this world. Now, there's another category that's just above that, and it's called the pious of the nations, or a pious non-Jew, who receives a share in the world to come. Now, the Talmud, Sanhedrin 105a, proves that the umos ha'olam, the Gentile nations, have a share in the world to come. If they are, here we go, chesedim, pious. Therefore, a non-Jew who keeps the Sheva Mitzvot is called Michesed Umas Ha'olam, of the pious non-Jews. As we like to say from our community, an Orthodox non-Jew. And he receives, or she receives, a reward in the world to come. However, he only merits this reward if he, now here's the catcher, accepts and observes the mitzvot from the viewpoint that they were transmitted and reaffirmed in the world via Moses at Sinai. Do you see the difference? A pious, a righteous non-Jew, sort of the average person that lives in the world today, or during any time, did the practical 7 laws, even though they didn't know them. Maybe they did know them, they just thought that made sense. They were good people, they gave charity, they took care of their families. They'll have reward in the world to come, but it will not be to the full extent as one who takes upon the Sheva Mitzvot and who've rejected Avodah Zarah, they study Torah, and they recognize that the Torah was given to the Jewish people, and that through that Torah given to the Jewish people, it was passed through Sinai via Moses, who keeps the 7 mitzvot only in account of the original covenant of Adam and Noah. This person who says these laws were established before time immemorial, they came through Noah from Adam, they came through Moses, and this is the commandment that all men should live at this standard because there is only one God and he requires it. This person is going to receive a great reward. Now, the person who is the other person, that is the person who just does it for the sake it makes sense, his reward is going to be lesser form, and he's not going to be considered the pious non-Jew. So we make sure we understand a regular pious non-Jew or righteous non-Jew is a person who does the mitzvot and they really don't even know. They may not even know there is who the one true God is, but believe there is a power in the universe. And they also don't know that it's a mandate passed down through Noah, from Adam to Noah to Moses, to the non-Jewish world. Actually, the Jews follow the Sheva Mitzvot all the way up to Sinai. They continue to this day to follow the Sheva Mitzvot, except they have the commandments as well. Now, the next question begs to be asked, how does one become a ben or bat Noach? To become a Noahide, one must accept the Sheva Mitzvot upon themselves from a conviction that they are divinely ordained. You see, one cannot really is not a Noahide just because they're born. And this is a misnomer amongst many. Now, there is a slight differentiation. Yes, they are descendants of Noah, but if they don't have the conviction that the laws are divinely ordained and they have been commanded into the world by God, then clearly they're just not full Noahides. Does that make sense? It's almost like a Jew who's born a Jew doesn't practice their Judaism nor accepts the commandments of God as being the authority of God in their life. They're not living to their fullest potential. And so what we're here to say is that the people of the nations are just good people. Do they need to come to the knowledge of God? By all means. Do they need to become Jewish? No. What is their identity? Their identity is being themselves, but being righteous people. And being righteous people of faith in the world. They also have to who understand that Moses reaffirmed the covenant sealed with Adam and then with Noah. By accepting the Sheva Mitzvot as such, one becomes that pious Gentile. He's at the highest status available, attainable by a ben Noach. While any personal acceptance of the Sheva Mitzvot is sufficient, it makes logical sense to capture the intention of the acceptance in the form of a verbal oath enumerating the Sheva Mitzvot. There has been some debate back and forth of whether one is truly a Noahide if he has not went to a Beis Din. There's actually a Beis Din that is set up in Jerusalem, and people can set appointments. They have been doing them since COVID over Zoom. And they make a declaration, which I think is fantastic. It's not required that it's done before a Beis Din or a group of non-Jews or Jews. This local community, NETIV, has a formation of a Beis Din in Houston that is made up of two very righteous Jews and a rabbi. And righteous Jews, Torah scholars and rabbi. And there they declare an oath to Hashem. Now, any text accomplishing these goals is sufficient. So if a person wanted to develop an oath themselves, here's an example of what you can do. And if you're interested in finding that example, you can go to World Noahide Center, and they actually have a printed document there that you can read. And if you want to make this oath yourself, by all means you can. And God willing, in the future, you would be able to go to any rabbi and have him put together a council of three, triune of three people to hear your confession or hear your oath. This is an example of what it would say, and by no means it has to be just like this. It says, I accept upon myself the 7 commandments of the children of Noah, including the general and specific prohibitions of idolatry, murder, theft, sexual immorality, blasphemy, eating of flesh torn from a living animal, and the general and specific commandments to establish a system of justice as commanded to Noah, Adam, and their descendants by the mouth of the Holy One, creator of the universe, as reaffirmed and transmitted by his servant Moshe at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. One is not required, once again, to accept the mitzvahs before a Jewish court. I've said that. So any personal or private acceptance is fine, even if you wanted to turn to your spouse and make this commitment with each other, perfectly fine. Nevertheless, it is a good idea to make a verbal acceptance before a witness. Now, you can do it to yourself. Some people don't have the privilege of that. But now in our virtual world, there's no reason why anyone who wants to make that statement before a rabbi or before a group of Ben or Bat Noach community, you can most definitely do it. A ger toshav, or a non-Jew who resides in the land of Israel. Let's examine that. That's called a ger toshav. So we had ger tzaddik, a convert, and ger toshav is a person who lives in the land of Israel. So this actually has created some special confusion for the modern Noahide, and will be discussed at length in further lessons. However, the ger toshav is referred to in many places in the Torah. If you look at your book, you'll see several references there. Exodus 12:43-45, Leviticus 25:6. It says, the land's yield of the sabbatical year shall be yours to eat, and yours and the residents. Look at Leviticus 25:35, another great example. You shall strengthen him, the convert or the resident, toshav. Like a laborer or a resident, toshav, he shall be with you until the Jubilee year. Leviticus 25:45, Leviticus 25:47, Numbers 35:15. We can go on and on. Now, the term ger, from the Hebrew word gar, meaning sojourn, refers to an alien and a stranger. Not the kind of alien that comes down in a spaceship, but a human being that is not a native-born Jew from a Jewish mother. They're considered a stranger, an immigrant. Toshav means reside. A ger toshav is, therefore, a resident alien, a non-Jew who resides in the land of Israel among the Jewish people. However, the Torah does tell us, they shall not dwell in the land, lest they cause you to sin against me and the worship of their gods. We see that a ger toshav must give up their idolatrous beliefs and practices as well, just to live in the land of Israel. How is this accomplished practically? How far must a non-Jew go to disavow idolatry so he may reside in Israel? Well, then the Talmud explains that a prospective ger toshav must come before Beis Din, a Jewish religious court, and accept upon himself faithfully the observance of the Sheva Mitzvot. However, the Talmud and later authorities tell us that there is no status of ger toshav in our days. We've heard this if you've studied much, and they say until there's a novel or until there is a jubilee. Nevertheless, some rabbis have instructed Noahides to accept the status of ger toshav even today. Others have not sought to confer the ger toshav status. Maybe in the near future there will be a court that would allow that in the state of Israel, but until then, that's not something that's going to happen. I think there was one person that was given ger toshav status, and it had something to do with the years that crops were to rest. I don't know all the details, but he was officially the only one. It was in the newspapers all over Israel. And look, one day maybe we will have that. Both of these are unnecessary. This talking about a court or et cetera, or a Beis Din. And we'll see further in the lessons why. The halakha, or decisive religious law, is that there is no need or benefit for one to accept the Sheva Mitzvot before Beis Din. Such an acceptance before Beis Din will have no effect whatsoever on the Ben Noach's religious status, ability to fulfill the mitzvot, or merit he receives in the world to come. So, it's important to understand that the pious non-Jew, the righteous non-Jew, or the ger toshav, which maybe there is and maybe there isn't, but the person who is in the nations, who is considered a goy, could potentially be a part of the 10 tribes. They don't know they're Jewish. They could be part of the captive child, people that were brought into captivity and remain descendants of people that were in captivity, have no idea that they are actually Jews, but they in essence are goy. So the issue is, it's what an individual declares in their heart is the most important thing. If you're Jewish, obviously, you find out you're Jewish, you should go back to a court and reestablish your Jewish practices. If you are not Jewish, you don't need a religious court to give you permission to be who you are. Hashem himself gives you permission to be who you are. In lesson summary, it's obvious that idolatrous thoughts and practices and beliefs are all prohibited. Ger tzedek is a non-Jew who undergoes conversion to Judaism. A ben or bat Noach is a male or female who is as a Noahide, who either has accepted those Noahide laws coming from God through Moshe, or they just live a pious, righteous life. Then there is the pious ones in the nations, or the righteous non-Jew in the nation, and the very pious, the one that absolutely says that he gives all honor to Hashem for the one who commanded and gives and fulfills all the merits that I'm going to fulfill or you're going to fulfill in this world, that it will be doing it for the purpose of, because this is what Hashem said to do. In the conclusion of this class, many people have wondered, well, what am I? Or what am I supposed to be? Now that I've left this religion, what's my title now? Who am I? I used the term in the last class, be Jewish, not Jewish. There's nothing wrong with dressing modestly. By all means, I think that a B'nai Noach or Bat Noach should demonstrate the highest level of modesty, should look different in the sense that they don't look like the rest of the world. They don't speak like the rest of the world. They're honorable people. They're full of integrity. That's how you show your distinction, is through your lifestyle, your behavior, your characteristics. That's how you show the difference. And in doing this and giving honor to God, knowing that he gave you these commandments to live, and he's also giving you the ability to be yourself. Enjoy your life. Make your identity your own. And don't worry about trying to be like somebody else. Shalom, shalom, until next class. Doom, 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 doom.